Okay. When we took the streetcar down, we'd take this, what was the Elston Avenue streetcar, and that went through a big manufacturing area in Chicago. And when the Depression hit, then you could see one after the other of these factories closing. And so it was just like a cemetery almost to go downtown, going this, at least 45 minutes you would go through all this factory area, and one after the other closed, nothing going on. And then of course you'd read in the newspaper about the people who are having trouble financially, and particularly the wealthy people downtown. And one after the other you'd read of jumping out of a window on Michigan Avenue or something because they'd lost everything in the stock market. It was a really bad time. How my dad kept going, running, by that time he was no longer with the newspaper. He had his own print shop, and he kept the print shop going through the whole Depression, and I don't know how he managed it. And he paid his men, even though he and his partner maybe didn't always take their wages. He saw to it that the men were paid. And he luckily kept a lot of his customers. They stayed with him, although sometimes they couldn't pay their bills. I have no idea how he managed all of this. And still, when I graduated from junior high, well, you wanted me to tell a little bit more about Brentford Park before I tell about surrounding our houses in Brentford Park was this prairie, just native Illinois prairie. It was a wonderful place with all these native grasses and wildflowers and so forth. And that's where the kids would play. It was a wonderful playground. And when you children were born and we kept coming to Chicago to visit, that's where you all played out. And the boys played in the prairie, Terry and Carl. They just loved it. Played baseball out there. And my cousin Harvey played baseball in the prairie too. Well.
And what about the shopping?
Oh, and then of course, in that neighborhood, if you were going to, we didn't. My mother didn't drive, and so to get groceries, you hoped that you could do it in the neighborhood. Unfortunately, there was one grocery store and one butcher shop. The grocery store was run by a couple of Italians, the Bianchis, and there you could get anything you needed, really. And they also had a soda fountain. And the big treat was when my best friend, Ruth Winner, whose father was the medical superintendent of the tuberculosis sanitarium, well, we got a nickel and could go down to Bianchi's and get ice cream cones. That was a really, really big deal. Didn't happen too often. Once in a great while, we got 15 cents.
Wow.
And then we were able to have a soda. So that was very, very special. But the butcher shop is a little shop down in the basement of one of the houses. And that was Bessler who had the butcher shop. And the thing that Terry and Carl really liked about Bessler's was the fact that they had pretzel sticks. And Carl particularly wanted his Preckle tick. He couldn't say pretzel sticks, so he had a Preckle tick every time he went with my mother to the butcher shop. That was the treat that he got. And Bessler knew just exactly what my mother wanted. She was pretty fussy with the meat that she wanted, but he knew what she wanted, and she always got the very best. So, what else, I wonder, should we talk about?
Well, Woodkey had Did he always have a car?
Well, it was a long time before we had a car. Even for work, my father didn't have a car for quite a long time. And he carried all these newspapers that he was delivering on the streetcars. I don't know how he did it. But finally, in the 30s, we did get a car. And in 1935, my father took the first vacation he had ever had. And he decided he wanted to drive to Canada to visit his relatives in Canada, where he had come when he first emigrated. So that summer, that's what we did. We drove up to Port Arthur and Fort William, Ontario, and visited the Cox family and the Bengtson family, although it was most his aunt and uncle were gone by that time, but we were able to visit some of these cousins there. And I've actually kept in touch with the cousins up until fairly recently. Now I think the last cousin that I knew of, either she is ill, her letter has come back the last time I wrote, so I'm trying to figure out what might have happened, because no one has let me know. But at any rate, then the following year...
You remember the drive home from there?
The drive home was the time we came down from Port Arthur through Minneapolis. And just before we got to Minneapolis, this was 1935, and we were hit by a dust storm. And that was the most frightening thing I think I've ever experienced. All of a sudden it was just black. You couldn't see the cars in front of you or behind. You could see the tail lights, and that was all. And finally my dad had to stop. And he tried to open the door to go out and see what was going on, and the door almost blew off the hinges. It took all his strength to pull that door closed again.